What's up, folks? Jeff Everhard here. I wanted to make a quick video to show you how you can bring your notification workflows into your code base with the Knock CLI. So let's get started. Okay, so I have an example Next.js app open in VS Code. The first thing that we're going to want to do is install the CLI globally. So I'm going to hop into Google Chrome where I have the Knock CLI reference docs open. And there are two ways that we can install the CLI. We can either use homebrew or npm. I'm going to copy this npm command and hop back into VS Code. We'll paste that into our terminal to install the CLI. Once that's done, we'll need to authenticate with Knock to use the CLI. So I'll hop back out into Google Chrome, head over to the Knock dashboard, and then I'm going to go to Settings, Service Tokens, and then create a new token. And now I'd recommend giving this a descriptive name so that you can track the service token usage across your organization. I'll give this a name and click Generate, and then we'll go ahead and copy that service token to our clipboard and hop back into VS Code. So there are two ways that we can authenticate the CLI with Knock. We can either pass that service token as a flag, or we can create a config file. My recommendation is to create a config file, especially if you're going to be using this frequently. So in the root directory here, I'm going to change into the .config directory, and then we're going to make a new directory called Knock. And then we'll change into that Knock directory, and then we're going to create a new file called config.json, and then we're going to modify the contents of that JSON file to store our service token. Now this has to be valid JSON, so we'll make sure that that's good, and we'll paste our service token in there and add our closing curly brace and then modify the contents of this file. All right, and if we want to check the status of our authentication, we can run the Knock whoami command. And then this should print out the name of your Knock account as well as the name of the service token that you're currently using. Great. So now that we're authenticated, I'm going to close out this terminal session and go back to the one that's attached to the root of my Next.js application. Move this up just to give us a little bit more space. So now let's look at a couple of commands that allow you to interact with the workflow resources you have in Knock. So if we run the Knock workflow list command, that's going to list all of the workflows in your development environment by default. And now that's important to note about the CLI is that it's going to use the development environment by default. And now if we want to get workflows from a different environment, say production, for example, we can run Knock workflow list and then pass in a flag, the environment flag, equals production, and then that'll list all of the workflows in your production environment. Now, if we want to get the details of a specific workflow, we can use the Knock workflow get command and then pass it the key of the workflow that we want to get details for. So in this case, the welcome workflow. And now that's going to list out some additional details as well as all of the different steps that are a part of that workflow. All right, so now that we've looked at how we can use those CLI commands to interact with resources in Knock, let's see how we can use the CLI to pull those resources into our local code base. So to get started, I'm going to create a couple of project directories. And so we'll start by creating a .knock directory inside the root of our Next.js project. And then we'll change into that .knock directory. And we'll go ahead and make one more directory called workflows, and then change into that workflows directory as well. And so to pull our workflows down locally, we'll run the Knock workflow pull command, and then I'm going to pass the all flag, so -- all. And now this is going to overwrite the contents of the current directory. So it's going to give me the option to decide whether I want to do that or not. I'm going to select yes, and then Knock will inside of our workflows folder, create a new folder for each workflow in the development environment. So now if we want to examine those, we can open up our welcome workflow and we'll see that there are a couple of things inside there. First, there's this workflow.json file that is sort of the big metadata file about your workflow. And then we have these other folders here, but let's take a look at workflow.json for a second. So at the top, we have this name key, which is the key of your workflow. We have a steps array that lists all of the different steps in this particular workflow. So we can see here that we have a channel step using resend to send our welcome email, and that it's using this welcome template. And below that, we can see that we've also got this delay step with some details about the delay duration. And then finally, one more channel step sending a how's it going email. And then we can see also if we open up either of these email folders, we've got a couple of pieces of data in here as well. We've got this visual blocks.json file, which is some styling and metadata about your message template. And then if we open up this visual blocks folder, we'll see that we have the actual markdown content of your message template. And so if we wanted to make a change to this message template, for example, like we wanted to delete this last sentence, we can go ahead and do that. And we'll save this file. And then before we push it, let's go ahead and validate it. Make sure that it's still a valid workflow. And so we'll run the knock workflow validate command. And then we'll pass it the key of the workflow that we want to validate. So in this case, welcome. And the CLI is going to go out and validate that workflow for us so that we know that it'll work the way we expect it to when we push it to knock. And so now to push that workflow and that local change back to knock, we can use the knock workflow push command. And then we'll pass it the key of the workflow that we want to push. And then we can optionally commit that as well using this commit flag. And then we'll have this .m for our message option and go ahead and say, removed sentence from template. And then if we hit enter, the CLI should push that resource back up to knock for us after validating it again. And then we can hop back into the knock dashboard. And if we head out to commits and go to unpush changes, we can see there that that service token that our CLI is using made that change locally and then pushed it back up to knock. Thanks for hanging in there with me as we learned about how you can use the Knock CLI to work with your workflows locally. There are a lot more features of the Knock CLI like translations and layouts that we'll explore in future videos. So thanks for watching and stay tuned.